an ex-Russian spy down south.
Right. And he's been caught up in a chemical attack.
It's ambiguous if the Russian government has ordered it, but there's a whole fuck ton of conspiracies about the fact that maybe the British government, MI5, have been behind it.
I suppose before we go into the proper conspiracy, what has been interesting is the British media, they've used it to kind of attack Corbyn and Labour out of seemingly nowhere, when, to be fair, Corbyn just went, maybe we should wait until there's some crystal clear evidence, and then Newsnight has that, like, that image of him, you know, with the Kremlin in the background. They're trying to link, you know, Labour left wing with Russia and the communism, but Russia's like the most absurd, corrupt capitalist country now, so I don't quite get the connection there.
I didn't think actually what Theresa May did was that bad, and I feel actually if I was in the Prime Minister's seat, I might have done something quite similar. You know, like if someone came in and gone, look, it's an ex-Russian spy, we know that for a fact, someone's tried to kill him with, you know, a chemical agent that we're, you know, 90% sure is, you know, Russian based, and the fact we also know they've interfered in, like, Brexit and the, you know, American election, would I consider putting some kind of, you know, precautionary sanctions on? I think that's not that bad.
The weird thing about it, though, is you kind of know, you know, that they killed Alexander Litvinenko.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's, you know, I don't think they didn't have a court case, but what was it, some kind of inquest or something, a public inquiry about it. And his widow had to fight to get that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they were really reluctant to actually look into it in detail and do anything about it after the fact. Sure, like, well, why is this occasion any different from that? What has changed that is making them go all hardcore now? Whereas, like, when that happened, and there was a lot of, you know, good evidence of, like, a specific person who was guilty of it.
Mm-hmm.
They were like, oh no, let's not do anything because we don't want to rock the boat with the Russians.
Behind the rooms in London, there's people weighing up what plays out well in the media and the public perception. And I just wonder if now, you know, the accumulation of Russia in the news and Russia doing that, where someone's went, this is the time, this is the last murder, now we can capitalise on this and be a strong British Prime Minister. May's trying to be close with Trump and keep that special relationship, but then Trump's got all the links to Putin. So if Putin can drive a wedge between the UK and the US, or the EU and the US, but I don't know if that's just people using their imagination. I don't, like, when people talk about Putin in Russia, it's like, is he this, like, ex-KGB mastermind, or is it just all just a coincidence?
That's the mindset of people watching RT, is that, like, because they see it as, like, what's the fucking problem here? It's not some masterminded, orchestrated narrative that's coming out of that channel. But there is, in some ways, method to the madness. I think that, like, both RT and the BBC are state broadcasters. What I think the BBC is different is the BBC seems to be more about kind of dictating what they want you to think Britain is. Like the kind of the lifestyle, what roughly the political scene is, what you should be thinking about stuff, right? Right from, like, their political discussion shows down to, like, things like Bake Off. This is what they want you to see, is this is Britain. Whereas RT is more about just pointing at everyone else and causing chaos. But it's in Russia's interest to do that. Like, the whole thing with Russia Today is it's to stop people thinking about what is happening in Russia today. So although there's not a narrative consistency in having people like Alex Jones on RT at the same time as Alex Salmond, because those people have two very, very different agendas, the common thing in the agenda is disrupting the system, causing chaos in their own way. Alex Salmond wants to break up the UK. Russia wants that to happen. He's against nuclear weapons. That's also beneficial to Russia. You know, the InfoWars end of it is just the Russians obviously want Trump elected. Come on up, Mr. Jones. Talk about your MAGA and all this other shit you're on about. You know, so it's not so much about, you know, dictating a narrative message. It's just about disruption and chaos. And the argument that people have with Putin is it intentional chaos, or is it just coincidence that actually RT kind of wants some ratings, so therefore these people are all batshit nuts, bring them up? Or he's in the Kremlin going, like, let's get these fuckers on this show so everyone starts questioning every Western government decision that exists at all.
I think Alex Salmond's show is a direct order from Putin in the Kremlin. And that's spearheaded it. I truly believe that.
Get me the fat man on TV.
Like, even when he signed up to that show, the climate was still kind of like Russia's interfering. Like, it wasn't before the US election.
I don't know if you saw the weird thing he did where he took a bit of time at the end of his show to do like a piece to camera to inform everyone that it's definitely not a propaganda station. Which I always think, if you're on a random TV show and you feel then you have to actually say into the camera, this is not a propaganda station, that might be a bit of a clue.
It was like when the coup happened in Zimbabwe, was it? And they had the military general on replacing the news anchor saying, this is definitely not a military coup.
I think the criticism he is getting is a bit unfair, but he should see the detrimental effect it has, maybe on his own legacy or the current,
Yeah, I mean, he's talking about the detrimental effect. I mean, like, Nicola Sturgeon's not okay about it. We know that. Like, she's come out and said this is not great. That I think she said something on the lines of, like, I would not have selected that particular TV network or whatever else. But he doesn't seem to give a shit. If you're discussing things like, the first episode I'm sure was to do with, like, the Catalonia thing in Spain, and you're talking about independence and that, but, like, you're doing this on a Russian state broadcaster. I mean, like, we're trying to go independent from the Russian state. Can you talk about gay rights on an RT show, knowing that, like, the connection with the Kremlin, or even women's rights for that?
I think he did in the last show. I think it's probably...
Well, I think you can do it, but you're not putting that criticism towards Russia. You go, look at these fucking Spanish wankers, but you're not actually go, yeah, but who's paying me to do this? Like, the Russians are also guilty of effectively the same shit that they are. So that's where I kind of find...
Yeah, that's right. I mean, he's right when he says, like, he's not being pressured to say certain things they're not saying, but just being on the station kind of shows a sort of naivety to, like, the broader thing. He's lending his voice to what they're trying to do overall, which, there's a lot of negativity in that. Like you said, they're basically trying to undermine a whole bunch of stuff right across the world.
Him being naive is my main criticism in that. And others who do similar things, they don't realise how much the kind of, let's say, the majority right-wing British media will jump on that and they'll exploit it. As but the ex-First Minister is on a Russian state TV. That just does not read well at all.
Public broadcasters in general, I think it's possible to have one and not have it be, a function of the state try to promote and the nationality of that country or whatever. Is it possible to have one that's kind of neutral?
Well, that's what I said before about the BBC being different from RT. The BBC is very much what you just said there. RT, at least the one we get, it's not focusing on Russia. The whole thing about it is it's turning the camera outwards. So that's where I think it's very successful, because it doesn't come across like a state broadcaster, because you don't see much of the state and what the state is doing. They're just interested in fucking everybody else up. So to answer the question, do I believe you can have a state broadcaster that is not immediately biased towards the interests of the states? Absolutely not. Like, if a government is directly funding a TV channel, it is going to in some way benefit purely that government.
I think the BBC is as good as you can get, but it's definitely deteriorated in the last 10, 20 years since they're worried basically about mostly a Conservative government just cutting the legs off them. The BBC does so much good stuff, but when you focus on the news, it's definitely just promoting what the government wants of that day.
It reminds me an awful lot of how Fox works. Because if you look at like the Fox comedy end of that, is sort of the Fox stuff. Like The Simpsons regularly make jokes about Fox News in the same way that the BBC almost has self-referential humour in its comedy shows about, it will bash the Tories. But then if you look at like the Fox News wing, like it's very obvious what the fuck that's about. In the same way the BBC News element, it's very, very clear that is slanted towards a very kind of right-wing message, I would say.
I think it's kind of small C conservative, or it's more, it's like pro-status quo.
I think it just comes across as right-wing because that's the way politics has been for 30 years, centre-right. Whereas people, I don't remember, obviously I wasn't born, but people used to accuse the BBC of being really left-wing, but that was back when the Labour used to have actually left-wing governments back in the 70s and 60s.
How they handle the monarchy, I think, is a really good example of, to me, that is not reflective of what the country actually thinks. That's reflective of what the state are telling you to think about this.
English people love the monarchy. Like, you get your urban lefties, but like English people in general, they associate it with their identity and Britishness. Whereas we're more like, just chuck them out. Well, see that whole, like, knowing Diana died actually, and that whole outpouring of grief, that's like the English mentality deep down.
Do you think the Russians killed Diana then?
It is a known Russian assassination method. I did read that the tunnel attack is that's how they used to do it in the KGB. I'm not saying that she was assassinated.
This is taking a big leap into.
But even that is tied into the whole. They've totally revised that history when they go back. Have you seen the movie The Queen?
No, but I'd rather gouge my eyes.
The whole narrative of the film is that Diana dies, the Queen is really heartless about it, and then Tony Blair.
Oh, Michael Sheen is Blair.
Speak to the public. Well, it's kind of like Theresa May this week going to Salisbury and fist bumping people. You know, it was kind of the same.
She definitely saw that as an opportunity to coming in as the strong Prime Minister.
She probably just didn't want to shake anyone's hands in case she caught any of that stuff.
Well, do you know, is the actual method of assassination, is that what's given it a bit more? Because it's a nerve agent.
The conspiracy theory seems to be that there's photographs circulating of guys going in with the NBC suits, the chemical suits and all that on, and they've clearly they're inside a cordon line, but then there's your fireman who's just with just his helmet and no mask. People are saying, well, this stuff is as deadly as they're saying. How's that working? The one thing I will say to anyone that has that thought is just ask the fireman. Just why is no one else just going mate, why aren't you wearing the mask? And he'll probably give you quite a reasonable response to it.
That's why I'm careful to jump in some of the conspiracy things, because I saw that picture and I went, oh, that's interesting. And then later on, someone was like, oh, that was the decontamination area.
Yeah.
That's all it is. But everyone's been retweeted 5,000 times. Everyone wants to believe a conspiracy because it makes their boring life seem more interesting.
I'm not eating or feeding into the whole MI5 false flag thing, but what is it about chemical attacks that Russians love? Why can't they just shoot somebody? That's a genuine question.
Well, apparently they're saying it was something that was put in her luggage before she left, so I suppose that way it's kind of a good way of killing someone without actually sending anyone here to do it.
We wanted to poison them. We're making a statement to other ex-spies. We're going to poison you with an nerve agent. We like to do it in sexy ways to make the world interesting. I mean, I am not on the Russian side, everyone. I'm just trying to put it in their perspective. They basically lost the Cold War, so maybe their mindset is damaged from that. That's why they're all behind Putin, because it's all strength. And that was apparently, I read historically, that was before the Russian Revolution, and after it, that's just the Russian mentality is just the strong leader. It's never
Are they
got
behind
away.
Putin though?
It's a good question.
We talk about the elections. I mean, are the elections?
Aye, because they had a rule where he could only be president for 2 terms or something like that. Is that right? And then so he went and was the prime minister for 1 term and then came back.
No, I thought it was what they did. No, you're right. What they did is they kept the positions but just switched the powers. So technically, it's all good, but yeah, they just switched the powers every 4 years. As a Mendeleev, he was just walking about going, "Oh yeah, I'm in charge." Not really.
But how popular is this dude?
That's a good question. I think he was genuinely popular. I don't know now though, since he's been changing his position. I think when he came in, because the democracy and the post-Soviet Union and Russia, it was there for a bit, but not really. It slowly just eroded away.
I think you're onto something a wee bit, because you were saying there about they lost the Cold War. Putin is a former KGB agent, so he must have been quite into the whole Soviet Union thing. So losing that, and the same way Hitler was a bit miffed about the whole losing that war. Is there a little bit of a parallel with that in that actually maybe he has arguably rebuilt to some degree the Russian state and is now getting a bit I'm the Führer, I can do anything I want.
A pride thing and Russian nationalism,
I think that him and Trump is not a good mix.
Putin was definitely pleased Trump won, obviously. I think he was quite worried about what Clinton would have been like. She was very anti-Russia. Which I think actually you could argue Hillary Clinton's foreign policy would have been the other direction, but equally it's kind of disastrous. You're kind of ramping up this aggression.
I think that's the thing. It all depends on where you fall down on your opinion of all the conspiracy stuff, because people keep drawing comparisons with the recent alleged assassination by Russia to Iraq, how that was handled. I go, but these things aren't the same. The Iraq thing was a random claim that really was more a political claim than an intelligence claim of 45 minutes. But that was it. There hadn't been an attack. There hadn't been something happened on home soil. There was no evidence at all. And also they were talking about a hot war. All Theresa May has actually done is go, there has been an attack on a former Russian spy with a Russian chemical agent, and as a result, I'm going to put sanctions on it. I don't see the immediate parallel between Iraq and this, but that seems to be the take that a lot of people have had. And I think like at some point, is everything a false flag? Is everything a work? Is nothing real? Or do you sometimes just have to go like, you know, if it quacks like a duck, walks like a duck, it's a fucking duck. Like when Hillary Clinton's getting punchy and doing all the stuff she's doing, is it because those threats are real? Or is it, no, but Hillary Clinton's a warmonger and therefore there are no actual foreign threats and she's the fucking problem? Or is there a time actually where a country like Russia is clearly fucking shit up and you have to make some kind of stand against it? But because that doesn't really fit into the British establishment, they're all fuckers mentality, you just go, Russia's fine. Russia never done anything wrong. They're fine. They're cool. But actually, this might be an occasion where even if we were an independent country as Scotland, like Nicola Sturgeon might have had to take similar action to what Theresa May has done.
I think that's a good point to make with maybe some of the people in Scotland, is to think, what would you do if you were Prime Minister of Scotland and a foreign country has poisoned someone?
Nicola Sturgeon has basically agreed with what Theresa May has done. And I think if this attack had happened in Edinburgh and we were independent, I suspect that President Sturgeon would probably have done something quite similar to what's happened here. But it seems to be because the person carrying out the actions carrying a Union Jack, they must be lying. But at what point do you stop that and actually go, no, wait a minute here, this might be just what it is?
I think the only difference is there's a slight kind of Union Jack swagger that's followed the initial statement, which is what people don't like. I think it's fair to say you can't be poisoning people in our country. But then if what's followed is that kind of just that British thing that happens all the time.
But if it happened in, fucking France, they probably would have done the same thing. I mean, already, I think those leaders of those countries like France and Germany have come out and they've supported Britain's response, which tells me that, like, well, yeah, they did the same fucking thing, which makes me think that Nicola Sturgeon and independent Scotland would have done the same thing. So when do you just put your bullshit aside and go, like, this is what it is?
I think it's also, you've got certain agencies like MI5 might be, they will have more information, so maybe they're feeding that up and that changes the attitude you take. Maybe they're saying, no, this is quite serious, it's part of a ploy to do something, so maybe you have to act in a certain way. We're all just talking as four lads, poisoning, I
don't know, but I think you've got a point even in there. It's like, people are saying, it's like, well, wait until the facts come out. And we're like, the nature of like international espionage is that the facts don't come out. It's like the Secret Service don't have to come out on live TV and say, well, here's every piece of intelligence we have on the Kremlin right now. I mean, you don't. I mean, we've never done that. And I mean, you can argue that that's right, wrong, or whatever. But I mean, if Scotland again was independent and theoretically we would have our own intelligence gathering, we'd have to have it. We'd have to have some kind of national defence force. This would be a component in it. And it's not like we would do that. We would not have our guys coming out on live television going, here's everything we know about the Russians. You would keep things in your back pockets. I suspect the Prime Minister is privy to information that the public are not. But why is that weird? You either say no one should have the right as a leader to withhold information from the public, or you say, actually, we've elected that person for the purpose of withholding that information because we believe they will use it responsibly. America has done this. Every other country on the world has done this, and humans seem to be alright about it. But then the second it doesn't fit with the fucking agenda that you've got personally, oh, they're all corrupt and they're all wrong. But again, none of the fucking nationalists, the yes people came out and said, well, fuck the French for them agreeing with them. No one said that. It's just the one with the fucking Union Jack flag is like, they must be wrong.
Well, there's it's almost like the whole issue of the poisoning has, it's been forgotten and it's just been replaced by everyone sticking their oar in for their viewpoint, which is when it happened, I was like, oh, there's another one. All right. To be honest, I didn't really care because I'm just like, what's going to happen? But it's obviously escalated. So I was following the kind of response and the foreign policy element, but then all the conspiracy stuff came out. And to be honest, when I was reading it, I was like, I don't really care. Yeah, it's a worry. You don't want nerve agents and people getting poisoned. But I'm also like, why has it erupted into this big thing?
It's like the 7/7 bombing is maybe another example of what we're seeing now. Like if the 7/7 bombing had happened when Twitter was a thing, guarantee within a few hours, some prick would have been on there going, it's the MI5. because that's what happened on YouTube shortly thereafter. But we're now it's happening live, like by the second update. But I don't believe 7/7 was an inside job. I don't believe that every single terrorist attack that occurs,
I thought
that's about killing that occurs, is a work.
I thought 7/7 was pretty. I don't know. There's any conspiracy about that?
It's a big one. There was a lot of thing about the photo editing. We talked about this a little bit on one of the podcasts I did previously.
There was a documentary that came out. It was about an hour long. Must have been about 08, 09. But they've since come out and they've debunked all the claims that film made. So it was kind of
I
ball.
thought it was just 4 lads from Birmingham.
It was.
Aware.
But what we're saying there is that documentary would be up on Twitter live now, and people would believe it. But like that's where it's pretty interesting to me to see this playing out the way it is, where like there's always some guy, as you say, with that picture going like, oh, but what about the fireman? Not understanding the context of the photograph, not understanding what's going on, but 5,000 people or whatever have shared that, and they now all believe this is a work. Oh, they're lying to us, it's MI5. And it's that worries me.
Well, we saw that with the Boston Marathon bombing. It must have been at least a couple of days afterwards I saw, oh look, here's this guy with literally his leg bone visible, and here's a picture of a man smiling. It's an actor.
That's it. I mean, these people that will post on Twitter about how bullshit Alex Jones's conspiracies regarding Sandy Hook and the recent school shooting that occurred. This is a horrible man. I hope InfoWars gets banned. But they'll defend RT, which has Alex Jones on it. And I'm going, wait, where's the consistent logic in this? Like, you have to make at some point, you basically have to say, this is bullshit. The people that choose to associate with it are bullshit artists. Fuck off. And that's just the way I would approach this.
I think Alex Jones gets away with it because it's comedy, and all his guests are. I think it's brilliant. I would keep him on YouTube. Who did the 2 English lads they get on? I forgot their names.
Paul Joseph Watson.
Yes, and like they're all serious and like conspiracy, and this is happening, and then they're like, and now I'm going to take my genuine brain fuel that's not just like caffeine and taurine or whatever's in Red Bull, and they're all serious to the camera. And all these people watching it, like they just, oh yeah, this is all fine.
Have you seen how they got Milo on recently to do that?
Yeah, he looked like he was dying inside. He really did.
Just the best. That guy's fallen so far off a cliff that he's ended up on InfoWars.
Showing vitamins.
They're so good. They'd see none of them are. I don't think none of them are a threat to democracy or whatever. They're all just a great laugh.
Most conspiracy theories I don't usually buy into because they require a level of competency and agreement and cooperation and, hard work that I've never seen the government ever been able to do in any other sphere. So it's like, why? How is it even possible that they managed to pull this amazing feat off? I mean, is it just like a million Darren Browns working in MI5? I don't...
Yeah,
pulling the wool over her eyes.
I mean, I'm sure there'll be some like conspiracy argument against that or whatever else. It just seems mind-boggling to me that if they're supposed to be this great Illuminati, they're rubbish. I mean, they're absolutely useless.
Life is generally more boring than everyone wants it to be. And see, when you see these conspiracy people, you're always like, oh, you've done well in life, haven't you? No, not really. They're usually sitting in a dark room going, I've proved it. Here's some low resolution screen grabs.
I don't think it's as big a deal as folk are making out. We're not going to go to war with Russia. I don't think anyone has any enthusiasm for that whatsoever.
Did you see that thing recently where it was something like, I can't remember the exact figure, but it's some terrifyingly large number of the US population are unfit for military service. So if Trump wanted to go to war, like he actually couldn't because like they're all basically too fat and stupid. Is that the generation that we're in? When you say like no one could be bothered with war, is it literally like we're actually so lazy that we're going like, you know what, we probably should, but
who knew that was the answer to world peace? Just everyone get fat.
Can't lazy. It does warm my heart that the younger generation don't give a shit about doing service for their country.